In a move that caught global attention, Iran's cautious tone might not just be diplomacy, it could be a silent signal to Israel about a shift in its missile range capabilities. Is Tehran quietly redrawing the boundaries of deterrence? Let's break down what's really happening behind the headlines. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, your trusted source for clear, factual, and strategic insights from the global defense arena. Today's story revolves around Iran's measured and carefully worded statements that seem to carry a deeper meaning. In the world of geopolitics, silence often speaks louder than words, and Iran's current tone is a classic example of that. In recent weeks, Tehran has avoided direct confrontation or inflammatory rhetoric, but subtle cues in its messaging suggest it's communicating something strategic, especially toward Israel. The focus is not on escalation, but rather on signaling capability, confidence, and control. Iran's officials have referenced advancements in missile technology, including enhanced precision and extended range, without explicitly stating new limits. This deliberate ambiguity serves a purpose. It lets adversaries interpret the message without Iran crossing any diplomatic lines. For Israel, this creates both concern and calculation. The unspoken question becomes, has Iran already achieved a longer missile range, or is it simply preparing the psychological ground? Either way, the message is clear. Iran wants to be seen as strong, restrained, and ready. In this video, we'll decode these subtle moves, explore the intelligence behind the tone, and examine how both sides are reading this quiet but potent message. When Iran speaks in a measured tone, it's rarely accidental. Every statement is designed to balance two goals, deterrence and diplomacy. Over the last decade, Iran has mastered the art of signaling without openly threatening. This technique keeps it within international norms while still shaping perceptions of power. For instance, by mentioning defensive readiness or regional security balance, Iranian leaders indirectly highlight their missile capabilities. The audience isn't just Israel, it's also Washington, Riyadh, and even Moscow. Tehran understands that every phrase in its public statements can ripple across multiple capitals. This particular message came after a series of reports about upgraded missile systems capable of reaching further than before. While Iran hasn't confirmed any new test, its state media subtly promoted older footage and emphasized strategic deterrence. The timing couldn't be more deliberate, coming amid heightened regional uncertainty and renewed tensions around Gaza and Lebanon. For Israel, such statements trigger immediate intelligence analysis. Every phrase, every televised speech is dissected for hidden meaning. Analysts know that Iran doesn't need to test a missile to send a signal. It just needs to talk about capabilities. That's the power of perception in military diplomacy. Next, we'll look at the historical backdrop of this messaging strategy and why Iran prefers psychological warfare over open confrontation. To understand Iran's current communication style, we need to trace it back to the evolution of its deterrence doctrine. After the Iran-Iraq War, Tehran realized that conventional parity with regional powers was nearly impossible. Instead, it invested in asymmetric strength, missiles, drones, and proxy networks to level the strategic playing field. By the late 2000s, Iran's missile arsenal had become a central element of its defense identity. Each test was not just a technical event, but a political statement. Yet as global scrutiny grew, Tehran learned to speak in codes. Fewer launches, more messages. The language of restraint replaced the language of escalation. This communication shift also had international advantages. It allowed Iran to appear responsible and rational on the world stage while still projecting strength. By hinting at potential capabilities, instead of showcasing them, Tehran kept its adversaries guessing, and guessing is exactly what strengthens deterrence. In this framework, Israel becomes both the audience and the target. Iran doesn't need to confront it directly. A single phrase about expanding defense horizons can be enough to create strategic anxiety. This silent competition between Iran's ambiguity and Israel's intelligence precision defines much of today's Middle Eastern balance. Next, we'll explore how this messaging fits into Iran's broader regional strategy and what signals it sends to its allies. Iran's regional strategy hinges on influence through message, not necessarily through action. Its communications often target multiple audiences simultaneously: adversaries, allies, and domestic citizens. The art lies in saying enough to show confidence, but not so much that it provokes open confrontation. When Iranian officials talk about defensive innovation or regional deterrence, they're also speaking to their domestic audience, reminding citizens that the nation remains powerful and independent despite sanctions and isolation. At the same time, those same words make regional players take note. Israel, with its advanced missile defense systems and surveillance networks, reads these statements with precision. Any mention of range adjustment, even indirect, triggers recalculations of strike envelopes and response time. Meanwhile, Iran's allies, like Hezbollah and certain Iraqi militias, see these cues as reassurance that Tehran's deterrence shield remains strong. This multifaceted communication works like a chess game. Each word is a move. Tehran's restraint suggests patience and confidence rather than weakness. It implies that it can act, but chooses not to, at least for now. In essence, Iran's message is, why are not escalating, but don't underestimate us. That balance between composure and capability is the true power of its tone. In the next section, we'll analyze how Israel interprets this cautious posture and what counter signals it might send in return. From Israel's perspective, Iran's messaging is a mixture of provocation and calculation. Israeli intelligence agencies track Iranian military developments closely, especially anything related to long-range systems. For them, even subtle linguistic hints, like references to strategic depth or expanded coverage, can indicate real shifts in capability. In Tel Aviv's defense circles, Iran's communication style is seen as both deliberate and deceptive. Israeli analysts believe that Tehran often hides operational advancements behind diplomatic phrasing, forcing them to prepare for the worst-case scenario. As a result, Israel's defense establishment regularly reviews its missile interception strategies and upgrades systems like Arrow and David's sling to ensure readiness. However, Israel also understands that Iran's messaging isn't purely about confrontation. Sometimes it's about deterrence, signaling that we can respond if necessary. The Israeli military thus weighs each statement against satellite data, intercepted communications, and ground intelligence before determining how seriously to take it. The outcome: a constant loop of caution, analysis, and readiness, an unspoken dialogue of deterrence across the region. What's fascinating is that both nations understand this psychological game perfectly. Each knows the other is signaling, and yet both continue, because silence itself is a weapon. In the next section, we'll explore how global powers interpret this quiet but escalating exchange. Global powers, particularly the United States, Russia, and China, watch this. Iran, Israel signaling with keen interest. Each has strategic stakes in how the balance of deterrence unfolds. Washington, for instance, interprets Iran's subtle tone as a warning against new sanctions or military pressure. The U.S. intelligence community knows that Tehran prefers to signal before acting. Meanwhile, Russia views Iran's restraint as advantageous. It helps maintain stability in the Middle East, allowing Moscow to project itself as a mediator while still cooperating with Tehran militarily. China, focused on trade and energy security, sees Iran's messaging as a calculated attempt to avoid escalation that could disrupt supply routes. What's remarkable is how Iran's measured tone manages to speak to all these powers at once. To some, it says, we're strong. To others, it says we're rational. That duality is what keeps the diplomatic space open, even amid regional tension. Israel, on the other hand, worries that this diplomatic calm allows Iran to quietly advance its technology under less scrutiny. That's why each subtle message from Tehran often triggers an international response, sometimes in the form of statements, sometimes in quiet intelligence coordination. Up next, we'll explore how Iran's internal politics play into this external messaging and why the domestic audience matters just as much as the foreign one. Inside Iran, political factions often differ on how to handle messaging toward Israel and the West. The moderate camp favors cautious diplomatic tones to avoid triggering new sanctions or isolation, while the hardliners push for more direct assertions of power. Yet, both sides agree on one thing: Iran must appear strong. That's why, even when officials use measured words, the underlying message remains defiant. It reassures citizens that Iran's defense posture is firm and that any perceived softness is part of a strategy, not weakness. Domestic media outlets reinforce this by broadcasting carefully edited military footage, missiles being assembled, troops marching, commanders giving statements without crossing the line into provocation. This dual message, calm words, strong images, creates internal unity and external ambiguity. It keeps the Iranian public confident while keeping adversaries uncertain. Moreover, the leadership uses this moment to showcase technological self-reliance. Every time Tehran hints at a new missile range or improved accuracy, it's not just sending a signal abroad, it's reinforcing domestic pride in national capability. This internal reinforcement is crucial, especially when economic pressure and external criticism intensify. The idea is simple: as long as Iran appears strong, resistance remains intact. In the next section, we'll analyze the technological angle, what range adjustment might really mean in practical military terms. When Iran hints at a potential adjustment in missile range, experts immediately focus on its technical implications. The term adjustment could mean extending range, improving accuracy, or modifying payload flexibility. Iran's missile program includes several families like the Shahab, Sejil, and Khorramshahr series. Each generation shows greater precision and endurance, and Tehran often releases limited technical data to maintain mystery. Analysts believe that the next leap could involve advanced guidance systems or hybrid propulsion, allowing for longer reach without larger payloads. However, adjustment can also mean something else entirely: strategic signaling. By using that word instead of expansion or crease, Iran keeps options open. It suggests capability without commitment. The ambiguity creates deterrence through uncertainty. For Israel, even a few hundred kilometers of potential range increase alters defense calculations dramatically. It shifts the protective radius around key cities and strategic sites. That's why such language, though cautious, carries weight. Iran's scientists may already have developed technology beyond what's publicly known, but by choosing to speak carefully, Tehran maintains plausible deniability while keeping adversaries alert. This is where technical progress meets psychological warfare, a balance that Iran has refined over decades. In the next section, we'll evaluate how this calculated communication impacts regional stability and what it reveals about the broader Middle East security environment. The ripple effects of Iran's signaling extend across the Middle East. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey all monitor Tehran's tone for clues about shifts in defense posture. Any perceived missile enhancement could trigger new security consultations and defense procurements. For smaller Gulf states, Iran's ambiguity creates unease. They want stability, but fear being caught in the middle of a strategic competition between Tehran and Jerusalem. Meanwhile, nations like Qatar and Oman which maintain dialogue with both sides, prefer Iran's measured approach over open escalation. Israel's quiet vigilance adds another layer. Its military planners know that even without a single missile launch, perception alone can alter alliances and deterrence equations. That's why Israel continues to bolster its regional cooperation with neighboring states under frameworks like the Abraham Accords. At the same time, Iran uses restraint as diplomatic leverage. By not escalating, it projects responsibility, an image useful in global forums. Yet its caution is calculated, not passive. It's the kind of control that says, we can act, but we choose strategy over reaction. This dynamic keeps the region tense but balanced, a fragile peace shaped more by messages than missiles. Next, we'll conclude by analyzing what this moment means for the future of regional deterrence and how both nations may move forward. As we conclude, Iran's cautious stance can be viewed as a masterclass in strategic communication. By signaling without shouting, Tehran maintains deterrence, manages perception, and avoids direct confrontation all at once. The subtle message to Israel is clear: Iran is confident, capable, and ready, but not reckless. For Israel, this means constant vigilance and continued modernization of its defense systems. The silent back and forth between these two powers defines much of today's Middle Eastern equilibrium. It's a balance built not on open warfare, but on perception, intelligence, and timing. Globally, this exchange also influences diplomatic calculations. The U.S. keeps watch, Europe urges restraint, and regional actors quietly prepare. Every phrase from Tehran and every reaction from Jerusalem become pieces in a complex puzzle of deterrence. What makes this situation unique is that both sides understand the language of silence perfectly. Iran's tone is not weakness, it's strategy. Israel's response is not aggression, it's anticipation. Together, they maintain a tense but calculated peace that could shift with a single message or action. As observers, we can only decode and interpret. The real decisions lie behind closed doors, where tone becomes policy and restraint becomes power. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue delivering deep, neutral, and factual breakdowns of global defense developments. Stay informed, stay analytical, and we'll see you in the next briefing.